there is a place where the road remembers more names than the towns it connects. Kolyma sits in Russia's far east, roughly level with Alaska across the Bering Sea. A place where winter temperatures can fall below -50 degrees Celsius. Where engines are left running through the night because turning them off may mean never starting them again. Larger than France, yet holding a population smaller than a mid-sized suburb. The question isn't whether people can survive in Kolyma. It's why the ones who leave so often find a reason to come back. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing people from all over the world joining these journeys together. Kolyma covers ground comparable in size to France, yet its year-round population could fit inside a single football stadium several times over, with room to spare. There are no chain stores here, no fast food franchises, no traffic lights for hundreds of kilometers at a stretch. Just the road, the river, and whatever settlement happens to interrupt the Taiga next. Magadan, the region's largest city and administrative heart, was founded in the 1930s as a port and processing point for the mining operations that first drew the Soviet state's attention to this corner of the world. Its name, adapted from an Evenki word for a nearby hill, predates the industry that transformed it into a city of tens of thousands. The Sakha Republic side of Kolyma carries its own legal peculiarity. Some of its northern districts are governed under special provisions for indigenous land use, granting reindeer herding and hunting communities protections uncommon elsewhere in Russia's administrative code. Travel here is not casual. Permits, fuel planning, and satellite communication are standard precautions, not paranoia. The landscape itself does the rest of the talking. Mountains the color of rust and ash fold into river valleys where the water runs the deep, almost impossible blue-green of glacial melt. In summer, wildflowers spread across the tundra floor in improbable, carpet-thick bursts of purple and yellow, gone again within weeks. In winter, the same ground disappears beneath white, so total it erases the horizon line, sky and land fused into a single unbroken sheet, broken only by the black thread of the road cutting through it. Beyond Magadan, smaller outposts along the highway carry their own quiet histories. Ustnera and Kandiga, further into the Sakha Republic side of the region, grew up around waypoints where fuel, food, and repairs became necessary simply because the distance to the next settlement made stopping unavoidable. Many of these towns were never intended as permanent communities. They were logistics points first, homes second, yet decades of continuous habitation have given them the weight and rhythm of any long-established town. A school, a clinic, a handful of shops that double as informal meeting points. The mountains that frame the highway are not merely scenery. They are functional, dictating where roads can run, where towns can be built, and which valleys remain unreachable by vehicle even today. Some of the most striking terrain, sheer rock faces streaked with mineral color. River gorges cut over millennia, sits within a few hours of a paved road, visible to anyone willing to make the drive, yet remains almost entirely unphotographed outside a small circle of geologists and long-haul drivers who pass through it as routine. Along the highway, towns like Susumun and Jagodnoye persist in various states of half-abandonment and stubborn continuity. Walkability here means something different than it does elsewhere. Everything within a town exists within a few blocks of everything else, because there is nowhere else for it to be. Soviet-era apartment blocks, built in flat, uniform grey concrete, were designed less for aesthetics than for a brutal practical logic. Thick walls to hold heat, small windows to lose less of it, central heating pipes run overground in insulated conduits because the permafrost beneath makes underground plumbing all but impossible. What's absent tells its own story. No billboards, no traffic congestion, no 24-hour delivery apps, often no reliable mobile signal outside town limits. Crime is low, not from any particular virtue, but from a simple fact of small-town life at the edge of the world. Everyone knows everyone, and there is nowhere to disappear to afterward. The people who remain, or who choose to come, tend to share a certain self-selected temperament: miners, geologists, teachers posted from elsewhere, and multi-generational families whose grandparents arrived under very different circumstances, and whose grandchildren simply never left. It is not a place people drift into by accident. Everyone here has a reason, even if that reason is nothing more complicated than, "This is where my family already is." Daily rhythms in these towns follow patterns shaped as much by the road's condition as by the clock. A delayed fuel truck or a washed-out section of highway can reorder an entire week's plans, and residents have grown accustomed to holding loose schedules, plans stated as intentions rather than certainties. Community bulletin boards, still a fixture in many town centres, carry a mix of practical notices, fuel deliveries, school closures, informal trade offers for goods that arrived in surplus. Social life tends to concentrate around a handful of shared spaces: the town store, the school gymnasium repurposed for gatherings, a heated garage where several families keep a shared vehicle running through winter. Newcomers describe an adjustment period measured less in weeks than in seasons. The first winter to prove they can handle the cold. The first summer to understand why anyone stays. Those who make it through both, long-time residents say, tend to stay for good. It is a filtering process no brochure could replicate. The town keeps only those genuinely suited to it and lets everyone else quietly move on. Brown bears outnumber people across large stretches of Kolyma's interior, and residents plan their berry picking, dog walking, and river fishing schedules around this fact the way other places plan around rush hour. Bear encounters are common enough that bells, bear spray, and simple noise-making habits, talking loudly on forest trails, are treated as ordinary common sense rather than exotic precaution. Beyond the bears, the ecosystem widens outward in tiers of danger and delight. Wolves move through the taiga in small, wary packs, rarely seen, but often heard at dusk. Elk and reindeer migrate along ancient corridors that predate any human road. Salmon run the rivers each summer in numbers dense enough to turn shallow stretches of water into a churning, silver-backed mass. drawing bears, eagles, and fishermen to the same banks at the same time in an uneasy, functioning truce. Birdlife adds its own record holders. Several species that nest in Kolyma's wetlands undertake migrations spanning entire hemispheres, arriving each spring from wintering grounds as far away as Australia and New Zealand, one of the longest annual journeys of any living creature on Earth. It is easy, standing on a riverbank in July with the sun barely dipping below the horizon, to forget how far any of this had to travel to get here. Fishing regulations in the region reflect this uneasy cohabitation directly. Certain stretches of river are seasonally restricted, not for conservation alone, but because bear activity along the banks makes them genuinely unsafe for people during salmon runs. Hunters and rangers coordinate loosely with research stations tracking bear movement, sharing informal reports of sightings near populated areas the way other regions might share traffic updates. Smaller, less dramatic residents of the ecosystem round out the picture: Arctic foxes that trail behind larger predators to scavenge remains, snowshoe hares whose populations swing in dramatic multi-year cycles, and a range of owl species that hunt through winter nights stretching nearly around the clock. Even insects play their part in the region's rhythm: a brief, intense mosquito season each summer, notorious enough that residents plan outdoor work specifically to avoid its peak weeks. Old-timers trade half-serious advice on the worst weeks to travel, treating the insect calendar with the same practical seriousness they give the ice road schedule each spring. The single most disorienting fact of living in Kolyma is not the cold, it is the light, or its total absence. Summer brings weeks where the sun barely sets, a pale gold dusk standing in for midnight before the sky brightens again within the hour. Winter reverses the arrangement entirely. For stretches of the darkest months, the sun clears the horizon for only a few grey hours, if it clears it at all. The disorientation is real, and residents describe it plainly. Sleep schedules unravel. Children are taught to structure their days by clock rather than by daylight, since daylight can no longer be trusted to structure anything. New arrivals often describe the first winter as the hardest adjustment of their lives, not the temperature, but the sense of time itself becoming unreliable. Adaptation comes in small, practical rituals: blackout curtains thick enough to simulate night in June, bright indoor lighting calibrated to mimic daylight in December. Community gatherings scheduled deliberately around the darkest weeks to give people a reason to leave the house. And then, almost without residents planning for it, the reward arrives on its own terms. The same darkness that unsettles newcomers eventually delivers the aurora borealis in sheets of green and violet light rippling directly overhead. A display so routine to long-term residents that some describe checking the sky the way city dwellers check a weather app. And so magnificent to first-time viewers that camera crews have been known to simply stop filming and watch. The psychological toll of the darkest weeks is taken seriously by local institutions in ways that might surprise outsiders. Schools adjust schedules to maximize whatever daylight exists. Workplaces build in additional breaks, and community health services actively watch for signs of seasonal low mood among residents, particularly newcomers unused to the extremity of it. Vitamin D supplementation is common practice, recommended almost universally by regional doctors rather than treated as an optional wellness trend. Long-term residents often describe a strange fondness developing for the darkness itself once the adjustment period passes. A sense that the enforced slowness of the darkest weeks offers something increasingly rare elsewhere. Permission to simply stop, to sit inside with family, to let the year's demands wait until the light returns. Some describe missing the darkness during the height of summer's endless day, when the opposite extreme brings its own difficulty sleeping. It is, residents often note, a trade rather than a hardship, one extreme repaid eventually by its opposite, in a rhythm the body eventually learns to trust. Between the extremes sits a short, strange transitional season locals sometimes call the quiet melt. A few weeks each spring when the river ice groans, cracks, and finally gives way all at once. An event loud enough to wake a town and celebrate it, in some settlements with an informal wager on the exact day it will happen. Kolyma's global significance is inseparable from its past. The Road of Bones earned its name honestly. It was constructed in the 1930s and 1940s largely through forced labor, part of the Soviet Gulag system's vast network of camps established to extract the region's gold and mineral wealth. Historians estimate that hundreds of thousands of prisoners passed through Kolyma's camps, and a significant number never left. The road itself, in places, was built over ground, where the dead were interred beneath the gravel. A fact residents do not hide from, and one the region has never fully separated from its modern identity. What does it mean for a community to build its daily life atop a landscape carrying that weight? What does it mean to inherit a road as both a lifeline and a memorial? These are not questions Kolyma answers easily, and it does not try to. The gold that drew the camps here in the first place still moves through the region's economy today, mined now by paid labor rather than forced. Geological institutes in Magadan continue permafrost and mineral research that feeds into national and international scientific literature. The past is not distant here. It is under the road. Beyond the mining industry, Kolyma's isolation has made it a site of ongoing scientific interest well outside geology. Researchers studying extreme cold adaptation in both human physiology and engineering have used the region's climate as a natural laboratory, testing equipment and materials under conditions difficult to replicate artificially. International interest in the region's Ice Age fossil record has also grown, with specimens recovered from Kolyma's frozen ground, informing paleontological research published and studied well beyond Russia's borders. The road itself, despite its origins, has become a subject of fascination for long-distance drivers and adventure travelers from around the world. Some of whom arrive specifically to attempt the full highway route as a personal challenge, drawn by its reputation as one of the most remote and demanding drives on the planet. Local mechanics along the route have, almost by necessity, developed a reputation of their own, capable of repairing vehicles with whatever parts happen to be on hand, a skill built entirely from distance and scarcity